we've got that. And put that back. Okay. And pull this up. Now we want the PowerPoint. Uh, I can. Okay, let's see. I can hear. Okay, we're just running. Oh, okay, we've got it. We'll get there. This I don't need, and I don't need. That needs to be on. The wire needs to be behind me, otherwise it gets caught. We're going to turn that on in a moment. But we've got that set. And the final thing is I'm going to bring in it over here. I think that will be the best. Great. Okay. So then we just need the map. Put the map over here. How are we doing on extended? Yeah, we've got a connection there. That's good. We need to open the map, and we bring the map over here, and we'll go full screen. And then we'll just do a little stick handle there. Nice. Okay, so that means that from a video standpoint, we're good right now. And
Can I interrupt you for a second, or do you want me to come back?
come back. I'm trying to get everything set up. I'm running a tech issue as well. So if you could just hold on. Thanks a lot. Okay. So we have video. We're going to have to get that set up. Tech support will come to get audio fixed. But we've got video, and I think I will put this up on the screen now to get everything arranged. So we'll do it. We're going to do it this way, aren't we? We're going to do that, and then we're going to do that. No, we want it over on the other side, right? Because it's counterintuitive. Okay, so then we want the notes. And to do that, we turn this on. Fortunately, it's connected. We export, has to be saved, okay? So once that's saved, we can export it to screen share. We can get wired. We touch that. And then we can move that over to this screen. And because it's counterintuitive, I have to do this side, and that will get me that. No, the notes are still not working. That's the other tech issue. Okay, so the workaround for that is I think we'll just go with the map for now. Yeah, that's good enough. So we fixed that. So we have two tech issues right now. Tech support is coming. We've got the video connected. We're live streaming. That's good. And I think we're going to get that good. We're going to get it connected. Finally, because I want to push out videos, I have 3 important videos to show today. Let's go to the Post-it. Right, that's where it is. Now let's just check this and see how this works. See if we get any audio in this room for a moment. So I'm going to push it out on Toria, share video, and let's see how. Okay. No. That's interesting. Please provide. Okay, let's try it again. Share video. Oh, I see what happened. I cut and pasted too much. So it's got to be just precise. There.
It's a working library. It's a library stuffed full of books from all the way around the world. And all these books, each of the books in this library, are written by someone who's been forced into exile. Language is migratory. It's diasporic. It moves across countries all the time. And written into the walls is this extraordinary deep history of the destroyed libraries of the world. So when you've written your name in a book in this library, you know that next year this book will be in a library in Mosul. So it's a history of excellence.
Losing your temper was to start all over again. Because if you have a beautiful sheet of cuneiform with a mistake on it, Ashurbanipal, who was in charge of these people, would have had a look at it, and his eye would immediately have focused on the one blemish, and that would have been that. Such is human psychology. So this is a masterpiece of calligraphy because it's balanced and beautifully written, and it's free of error. Next slide, please. Well, unfortunately, not all tablets, as we will see, are in such good condition as this one. It's got a little bit of damage at the bottom. This is such an amazing document. It glows to me with a kind of sunshine coming out of the wedges. So this is a dictionary. It's what Assyriologists always call a lexical text, a dictionary text. And the point I would draw to your attention is, firstly, how beautifully laid out it is. The scribe has ruled columns with his stylus and written carefully on the left of the double column a word, and on the right its equivalent or its explanation. And this comes from a huge encyclopedia of technical words, and this bit is to do with things made of wood. And in the top left-hand corner, you have a list of different kinds of table, because in the palace in Mesopotamia or in normal people's houses, there was more than one kind of table. We would have a telephone table, a billiard table, a drinks table, I don't know what. Well, so they had different kinds of tables, they had different kinds of names, and the unusual words which are listed in the left-hand column are explained as table. So instead of writing table, 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 which is what was necessary, the scribe has done something which I would like you to really focus on for a moment because it's so revealing. So in the upper left-hand corner, you can see a bit which is almost empty, but there's one sign written in a whole column, the same sign all the way down by the ruling, and that is the number 2. It is 2 cuneiform wedges written together, which mean ditto. So the full word above says table, and then underneath it goes ditto, 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 rather than writing them all out again. And when you have a composition of thousands of lines with much repetition of the meaning, that's a very simple thing to do. So we have there some kind of ingenuity of mind, which means you don't always have to do things the way they've always been done. This was an innovation to speed things up and just as effective. Next, I should say also that from tablets like this, after the script, which is so bizarre and so alien at first, was first deciphered, these ancient dictionaries with lists of words, either Akkadian, Assyrian words, or even Sumerian and Assyrian words, were used by the decipherers in the last century in order to understand the vocabulary. So we had tools bequeathed to us from this library which helped us decipher the script, or I should say them decipher the script, so that we can read it.
Okay, so now do you hear me, Yasmin? You should be able to. Can you just put a nice big yes in the live chat? And let's see. I hope so, but let's check here. And I think I'll blast it. Yep, sorry. Sorry about that, guys. That means I know it's working in here. Yes, okay, hold on. I need to get confirmation from the online Cosmos. Can you can you jump? Yasmin, can you use your microphone and say you can hear me? George, can you hear me? Let's hear you. Go ahead. We should hear you. Yes? Guys, are you there online? Oh, it might be. Okay, we'll try one more. George, we can. Good. Okay, so I'm going to start very shortly. And for the online folks, just to keep things moving, I'm going to try and have a student here today monitor the live chat to let us know if there's anything. But otherwise, please do not hesitate to jump onto your microphones so we can have a real-time class. And that's the idea. But if you don't want to, fine. Just know that we may not get to you in live chat for a while because everything's happening here in this room, essentially. But you have your microphones. You're welcome to jump in. So finally, before I get ahead of myself, just want to make sure we're all good. Yep, and I'll put that back for now. Those are my in points for the videos. And I think we're good. We're on YouTube. We have audio. This is all a bit of a dog's breakfast around the screens. I can't see anything there, but I'll have to sort of work with what I've got right now. And we can start. I'll get microphones here so we can sort of move these around. Here they are. Okay. And everybody knows what they've got to do. We'll put our planet over here. And we'll come back here. And yeah, I think we're good. Sorry for the delay. Blame it on the slow bus driver who had a mask on, which is fine, but I think also they or she or he, I couldn't tell behind the mask, was a little worried about the rain and might have just being a little a little extra cautious. I asked as we were coming into the campus if he could drop me off at just the corner in front of the center because I wanted to get to the class on time, and he said no. So it just goes to show you that people today, we have to be sometimes aware, might be a little afraid of the world and their bosses. But I'm not going to get into a rant here. That's not fair. Everybody's trying to do their jobs well. So we're going to start. And I have been listening to all of you, as you know, through this semester, trying to develop the right format that's going to work as a flexible, high-definition multimedia format. And so I have something today that I think is going to work really well, and to get the content all caught up. And essentially, as I mentioned to you last week, everything for the students here, the students watching online synchronously, and the students watching the recordings happens in this class, including the lectures or the content that I give interactively. So today, what I've done is I've prepared an abbreviated multimedia lecture, but it's going to be very much a discussion. And essentially, I think that this will allow us to be able to really explore the content together, make sure everybody who's watching the recordings gets the critical content. And then there will be reflections, of course, to do afterwards. But I think I've got a way to do an abbreviated multimedia. You know, there's 3 videos, there's a lot of slides, there are books I want to read from, as well as the story that I'm going to tell, which is I'm going to take you right up to the conquest today. And we're going to end there when in the 1500s, 1492 to be exact, but then that started a rush of people coming from the Eastern Hemisphere to the West. We're going to see the 2 parts of the planet come together. And I'm going to read to you something from a great book, which has an eyewitness account of what took place in Peru in 1532. And it's a remarkable eyewitness account of something that happened when the Afro-Eurasian world, that part of the world, came together with the Americas. That is the seminal, maybe the most important moment in world history, when 2 halves of the planet came together. So I have to get you up to that point so that you understand why it ended so violently. And this eyewitness account that I'm going to read to you from a book, a classic called Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond, will help you to understand something about cultures colliding, which is very much what world history starts to become as we look more and more at civilization. I probably don't need to remind you that right now, as I look around me, there is potentially a clash of cultures right here. Think about it, right? Just look at the people and the faces, and we can already start to understand something about the way the world has been getting closer and closer together, and all the cultures are getting closer together. And is it any wonder that there's so much conflict and so much war starting again? And to even pose a big question to you, but we're not going to touch on that today. I just want to bring everything into the moment today, 2023, October the 20th, I think it is. Here we are once again with a war that has broken out in the Holy Land. What else is new? And here, once again, we have the clash of religions.
Sorry,
There's more to it.
it's a
The
70
war
year
between
thing.
Israel and Hamas right now, the extremists in Palestine. We can talk about that later, but I just want to remind you that if you lived through September the 11th, 2001, when Al Qaeda, drove planes into the World Trade Center, and you had to endure those images of people jumping out of buildings in Manhattan. We might understand something about the enduring and almost intractable problem of religious extremism in this world today. Yes, Ryan? Oh, great. Okay, good. So, okay, good. So there's stuff going on in the live chat, which means they can hear. Thanks, Ryan. So let's come back to the story because there's so much to talk about. Hi, Elgin. Oh, thanks. Come on in. I think I've got the audio figured out, so I solved that. The only problem is that I need one thing. I just need that camera turned on so I can see what that's seeing, and also the smartboard's on the blink. I'll show you what happens when I try and put it up here. So we'll come over to here, and we'll go pod 1, and you can see here, even though I did press screen share on there, okay? So thanks a lot, Elgin. But I can work around that for now, and I'll bring back the map, and we're good. So we're going to end today with a reading from a classic world history with an eyewitness account of what took place in 1532 in a small Peruvian Andean town called Cajamarca. Collision at Cajamarca. But there's a lot I need to help you to understand because there's so much we've missed. And so I'm going to forego the reading of reflections or any review right now so that we really have time. I need to get you up to the conquest by the end of the first half of the semester. There's just so much coming in the second half in terms of more modern history, the revolutions and democracies and industrial revolution, and then the 20th century, which is a tumultuous, difficult time. But the 20th century, I will talk about over a period of 2 classes because it will help you to understand something about where we are at this moment with a potential widening of a conflict in the Middle East that could draw in other powers in the world and present to us a third world war conflict. I don't think we're going to get there. That's my take, okay? Just so we don't get too depressed in here. We've been down this road before. And we will see in the 20th century something remarkable that took place called the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world was on the verge of a nuclear war, and it didn't happen. So, anyways, but let's talk a little bit and then we'll start the story, okay? Great, go ahead. Yeah, okay, good. We'll get to the chat. Yep. Yeah, go ahead. Hold on, let me just make sure. No, the microphone's here. Okay, just a second. Elgin's here. He's working on one thing. My mic. Why is this not? Elgin will come back. Okay, can you hold your? Would you be able to hold your thought till we get the microphones working? Okay, just make a note. I promise we'll get to it. But I'm stick handling quite a few things right now today, and I do not want the tech to slow down the content. It's a constant battle for me in this room. And I think we're at a point now with the tech where we literally can, as we will, go to World Expo in 2025. I'm going to be meeting with students after the class today to begin planning a presentation there on the fact that we have the classroom of the future here. But the tech is something I need help with. So, okay, finally, I just need, the microphones are not working, and it might be something I'm missing. Okay, so Elgin's going to fix up. While he's doing that, let me just see what's happening in the live chat. Thanks a lot, Ryan, for letting us know. And let's see what's coming in right now on the live chat. And I'll make this, for the moment, full screen so I can see it clearly. And let's, okay. It's a little small today. Could you, whoever wrote that, Yasmin, are you able to read that out loud on your microphone?
Which one would you like me to read?
Oh, start from the beginning.
Okay, so 9/11, first of all, is not an act of religious extremists. It was a planned attack by who? The Pentagon, whoever it may be, but it was not an act of religious extremists. It was a way to also minoritize Muslims, as they are constantly viewed as terrorists, kind of like how each race is kind of described in a different horrible term.
Sure. Well, you know
So when
what?
we talk about the American government, they are
Yes.
a group of terrorists, but we cannot call them terrorists. They are called an army. But they
Okay, good.
commit
Keep going.
terrorist acts on children all around the world. But because our media is controlled by these parties, especially Zionists, it's a very confined media.
Well, this is excellent. I now see a teachable moment that has just been presented. And so hold on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the lesson for a moment because I really like, Yasmin, the fact that you've brought this up. You've brought up a very raw nerve to the class. And
since last
so-
class, it's kind of gotten to me, and it's been something I've been thinking about often.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So let's stop for a moment and explore this, okay? Because this is history that's living right now. Great, Elgin, thanks a lot. And also, Yasmin has presented a perspective that needs to be challenged and confronted. And also, I can see from others here right now some nodding that you're not alone, Yasmin, okay, in terms of what you've just said. So first, we're going to have to understand something about this conflict. I will do my best to be your professor and have a discussion about this as best I can, but I don't want to avoid this. But the fact is, this is difficult, but we need to have it, okay? So are you okay to be able to talk about this right now before I jump into the history lesson? Because the truth is, I want history always to be relevant to you in terms of what you're living now. And so we need to address this, okay? Now, first, I need to put aside the fact that I'm Jewish. which I think you all know. You don't? Okay. So, but I need to tell you that, because for the sake of frankness and honesty and transparency and understanding, it needs to be stated. Okay? But I'm going to put that aside for the moment and talk to you as my equals, intellectual equals, my classmates, my students. But ultimately, you're my classmates and I'm your coach. So first, I made a statement that made Yasmin put a good comment in the chat. So let's start talking about this, and I'm going to make sure that I don't talk too much, but I present information to you and ask you questions to help you to maybe think about other perspectives. That's all, okay? I do not want our discussion to become in any way intellectually violent. I know now that there has been on campuses in the United States and increasingly in Canada a lot of conflict over this war. And so I want to make sure that first we can talk as human beings. Okay, so Yasmin, I'm going to ask you, as I'm asking myself to do this, that in our class, we are humans first. Jews, Arabs, Chinese, Palestinians, South Americans, Mesoamericans, second. That's a very important premise to start with. Yasmin, are you prepared to start from that premise?
Oh, no, for sure. I completely respect all religions and all cultural backgrounds. There's a large difference between Zionism and Judaism. They're not interconnected.
They are, but
Zionism was created in Europe, whereas Judaism was not.
that's true. So but first, we're gonna have we'll get the notes going, which is working a little bit later. We'll put some when we review. But let's first understand, Yasmin, when you heard me say that 9/11 was an act of terrorism, and that I'll stop for a moment. That provoked you. That obviously made you write that comment. And can you elaborate some more on what you've written? And then we
Sure.
will, so I know what's important here. I know what we need to be talking about. Go
So
ahead.
there's always been such a large misconception to the attack of 9/11, and not until recently those declassified documents came to light. But personally, when I was born in 2000, my aunt, who has an Arab last name because my dad is from Lebanon, so when my aunt was trying to come visit me, her husband and her had got stopped at the border to even enter Canada because of their last name. So she, at the time, was unable to come here. And not until recently was she easily able to come. So
That's fair. Are you ready to be challenged on your sources?
of course.
You mentioned a declassified document. Where did you learn about that?
A declassified document from the CIA.
Where did you hear about that?
I have the website open if you'd like me to share it.
Absolutely. Okay. Send us the website, because one of the things we need to do when we talk about these things is first verify the source of information. We have discussed in this room, in another class, the Global Leader class, something called propaganda theory. And I want to remind you of this, okay? During the Second World War, when Adolf Hitler and the National Socialists in Germany came to power, he had a head of propaganda, and his name was Joseph Goebbels. And Joseph Goebbels understood something about propaganda. He said that if you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, even if it's not true, people will begin to believe it. Now, I say that because now we're living in a time where there is a massive amount of information available at our fingertips. A massive amount. And we have to be aware of the fact that maybe our sources understand this idea of propaganda theory, and the source may look really good, but in the end, when we start to drill down, we see there's not much there but an angry person, a lot of fear, and a very smart person who understands if I shout and I keep repeating it, people will believe me. This is propaganda. So, Yasmin, I want to ask you, that's why I want to check the source. I'm prepared to be open to this, but I'm going to try and put my scholarly hat on, my journalist hat on, and go, I want to be certain of the sources, just the way when I bring books in today, like Plato, The Last Days of Socrates, which was his eyewitness account of Socrates' death, or Leo Africanus, which is a novel about an Arab trader traveling across northern Africa. And I know this is a novel, and I was going to preface it that way. A novel is made up. A novel is not factual. When I bring Guns, Germs, and Steel in, I know that this is a work of scholarship of a person who spent many years researching this. And when I bring the travels of Marco Polo in, I will preface this by telling you, even though he was considered our first global citizen, there are questions about the veracity of this. It's said that he dictated this to somebody he was sharing a jail cell with after he returned from China, but many take this as fact. So when I present sources to you today, I'm going to try and tell you all of this is great stuff, but some of it may not be entirely true. So let's look at Yasmin's source. That's all I'm asking right now, to make sure that what she just said to us, as a matter of fact, it wasn't said as I'm thinking maybe. She said, she declared this as a fact. I'm questioning that. I'm questioning her source. But first, let's look at her source. Is there a declassified document that says, okay, we'll get there in a second, okay? We'll get there in a second. Well, because I gotta, Maite, it's gonna get a little rough, but I've got to make sure that everybody speaks, and ultimately that Yasmin is respected for what she said. So first, I want to look at Yasmin's source, okay?
People
And
are by
then-
all means able to disagree with me. This, I guess, could be just my point of view. It's up to whoever wants to decide whether they want to believe it or not, but I will find
Okay,
the correct
is the
statement.
microphone? Just a second. This is, you know, I want to make sure everybody's heard. This is such an important discussion. I know, but the audio's not working here, and so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this. We're going to do a real workaround today. When somebody wants to speak, well, I'll bring the microphone to you, or you can come to the front. But for now, I'm going to bring the microphone to you, okay? And I'll hold it here, and you speak, okay? And that way, everybody is heard. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me? I think so. Anyways, hi Yasmin, I'm Ariana. I feel sorry for the thousands of Americans that died, but I feel even more sorry for the millions and millions of Arabic people who were brutally murdered for something that they weren't even a part of. And it is very upsetting to me because I have firsthand witnesses of my stepdad who has been faced with racism, and he's been faced with, I can't even think of the fucking word right now. It is absolutely disgusting how we have been treating people all around the world, and in fact we are just human and we are all made up of the same parts. I mean, some people have like less toes, for example, but we're all human, right? And I just, it's disgusting, and there shouldn't be like any sort of like, especially in the Holy Land, there shouldn't be so much conflict. This is a place where we have originated from. This is where culture comes from, where religion comes from. The main three Abrahamic religions. We are all brothers and sisters, and we're in this together. And I really don't like how this has turned into such a war, because we should all have the right to these places, and it shouldn't be a matter of, like, even though you guys were here first, we're gonna take away your right to water or right to healthcare or all these things, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's not fair. And I really feel for these people. I really do, because they have faced a lifetime of suffering. It has been 75 years that this nonsense has been going on. And I think we just need to come to terms with everything, honestly. Like, all these things have happened, yes, and all of it is bad. And, like, yeah, I believe that the CIA documents, they're declassified and they are real, and, like, it is from the government. Inherently, we are all human. We are not inherently bad people. And I think that's what people need to remember. There are just things that we do that are not normal for us to be doing.
Thank
I
you
could
very much.
I agree with what you said 100%.
And I also thank you for coming into a space, a classroom, and telling us what you think and feel, so that we can really learn together. However, I have to come back, and I will let this sit there before I go over to Maite to give you this. Ariana said that she believes that there is a declassified document from the American government that says that, I think what it says, or what you're saying, is that the attack on the World Trade Center in New York in 2001, September the 11th, was orchestrated by the American government. This is okay. I see what Brian's nodding. Okay, we don't know that. I've asked for the source on this, but I don't want to in any way violate Ariana's sincerity, okay?
Regardless of what has happened, numerous people, millions of people in the Middle East have died because of it. No matter what has happened, Al Qaeda, whatever the fuck, I don't care. CIA, FBI, I don't know what is going on in the States. Regardless, millions of Arabic people, brown people, just in general, have passed away, and they were brutally murdered. Children, even, who are fighting for their lives in Palestine, for example. My little sister has a friend who lives in Palestine, and I've seen really graphic videos that he's sent her, and, like, it's really disgusting. Like, I'm really not a fan of what I'm seeing.
This is excellent. I'm going to bring this over to Ryan, and I also want to remind you too that we're now in a very important place of understanding and even healing. Let me tell you what an Israeli mother said, whose child died from Hamas's attack on Israel when people were dancing, and it was a kibbutz, and there were about 200 Israelis who were killed when these terrorists came over the border and shot them, threw grenades into their kibbutz, and did many other things. But one of the things that the mother said, who had just lost her child as well in this, she didn't say, we must go and kill all of these people who did this. She said, and this is the courageous thing, she said, we want real peace now. The question of what real peace is going to be in this part of the world, Ariana, is something that maybe we can try and explore a bit more today through history, and maybe I can shed some light on it. But this is a conflict that some call intractable, unsolvable. I find that hard to believe. Humans can solve big problems.
Could we
Anyways, I want to bring this over. Sorry, go ahead, Yasmin.
Could we instead call it an organization like it is? It's not.
Could we what?
Hamas is not a terrorist group. It's an organization. It's a militia, similar to how in Africa, when the government is not on the side of the people, they have to form some sort of an alliance with the community in order to fight the oppressor, which is their own government in a sense. Same as in
Well-
Lebanon, the multiple sectors of militias, I would call them, not terrorists. It's prominent all around the world. In Africa, there's a lot of militias. They're not considered terrorists. Same as Hamas. It's not a terrorist
Okay.
group.
Let me tell you why I use this term, and then we'll come over to Ryan. Any organization that claims that its enemy has no right to exist and should be destroyed and obliterated cannot even be acknowledged to exist. Hamas has never wanted to acknowledge that the Jewish state exists and that Jews have as much right to be there historically as anybody else, because the history of Jews goes back as far as anybody else. And I will explain. Let me just tell you one fact that you may not know, which is really fascinating. Do you know the story of David and Goliath? Okay. Well, let's hear what the story is for a moment, because it will tell us something about the claim to that part of the world. The only reason I'm using that term, Yasmin, is because this is an organization that does not want another group of people to exist. They refuse to acknowledge the existence of Israel and of the Jew.
But Jewish people, Christian people, and Muslim people all live in Palestine together.
That is true, but
Jews,
I want to make
secular
sure
Jews.
I'm going to stop, okay, and let Maite speak, because she's eager to speak. And yeah, okay, well, no, you had something to say, and okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have certain point of views. Okay, points of view. Sorry. First, when you're saying about David and Goliath, do you want me to the David and Goliath? Okay. Okay. So they're. It's all right to say the Hebrews. The Hebrews, they were Israelites. Okay. They were fighting against I think, Philistines. The Philistines. And they couldn't win this battle. So it was kind of a siege. You are on that corner, we are on these corners. And God told, well, not God, there was a little boy around, I want to think around his 15, 14 years old. And he was a shepherd, and her parents sent the boy to the camp to provide with food to their brothers. They were warriors. And when he was there, he was like measuring the enemy, and he said, "Oh, I can beat him." The enemy had launched this huge guy called Goliath was gonna be. It was their champion. It was a huge man, very, very strong. Yes, they were very, very, very strong. And David said, "Oh, let me go. I will do it." And Goliath, everybody said, "Are you crazy? You're just a kid. He's gonna, yes, he's gonna have you for breakfast." And he said, "No, no, no, I can do it." So he went down to the river. He took like 5 rocks, those smooth rocks. So he had, how do you call this thing that they slingshot? Okay. He okay. Okay, it's for killing birds. But the shepherds in the Middle East used to expel coyotes and wolves and whichever animal wanted to eat the sheep. It's a weapon. It's to throw rocks. So he went to face Goliath, and Goliath looked at him and started to laugh, of course. And David threw the first rock. Well, I don't know how many rocks he threw at him, but at least one hit him in the head, and he fell down dead. And everybody said, oh, it was the hand of God that guided David and killed the giant. But Goliath, because it was too big. It was like a tall man. Okay, that's the story.
Okay, let me replace the battery first. We've got tech issues I'm trying to deal with because our microphone. So, Jasmine, hold on a second. We're going to replace the batteries, and I'm going to come back, and then I'm going to gradually bring this back to history so that we can shed some light on this idea of religion in history. Okay, hold on. Yeah, okay, I need to replace the battery. Okay, so here. Properly. Okay. So let me just clarify, okay, and summarize for a moment. The story of David and Goliath that has come to us in history has a very important meaning for all of humanity. Many of us know the story, but maybe not. Let me just check. Let me just check from the East. Are you familiar with the David and Goliath story? There you go. So I assumed everyone knows, but here we see students from the eastern part of the world who don't. And that's why we have a global class. So David was a small, I would say almost a person who was potentially a victim. And he fought against a large enemy, Goliath, who was the god king of his people, the Philistines. You're going to come to understand this term, god kings. Well, he was a warrior and he was their spiritual leader, and also the fighter, because in history, in all city states, including even in India, the emperors, the leaders and others were considered divine figures, but they were also great warriors. And they used a lot of propaganda to convince us of that, until actually somebody by the name of Ashoka came along in India and changed that idea. And I was going to talk about Ashoka today, the first leader in history who renounced violence. He's the foundation of the nonviolent resistance movement in the world for all of those who have fought in civil rights, people who have fought in humanitarian efforts like Mahatma Gandhi. They draw their inspiration from Ashoka. Goliath was defeated by a small person who lacked the strength and weapons, but somehow he was able to defeat Goliath. And the story of David and Goliath that has come down through history is it's possible for the little guy who is threatened by the big guy to win. David became one of the early kings of Israel. I want you to understand something about how a Jew sees power. This is the problem. Jews are among many peoples in the world who see that they have been fighting against oppressive forces that have tried to destroy them. And there's a lot of truth in that. During the Crusades, for example, I will talk about that, when religion was such an important power in Europe, and people who were considered witches or heretics, or who were opposed the religious government at the time, they were burned. Many were Jews. When a plague struck Europe in the 1300s, the Great Bubonic Plague, the worst disaster in human history, next to the conquest in which many millions died, there were 75 million people in Europe in the 1350s. In a matter of 4 years, about 1/3 to 1/2 of Europe's population was decimated by the bubonic plague. There was no medical science then. So people went looking for those who they thought had brought this plague to them. And they said the Jew had. And the Jews were thrown into the fires, again, for bringing the plague over. and causing all of this damage. I'm not going to talk about the Holocaust. I'm not going to talk about the Second World War. I simply want to tell you that when you go back far enough in history, right back to the beginning of civilization, and you look at how religions have formed at the heart of many faiths and many peoples, not all, but many, is a sense of great injustice, a sense that they have not, that their rights have not been respected, their land has not been honored, and the Jew feels that too. So I like what Ariana said, which is, I'm sick of the suffering that all humans are facing. Not just Jewish, not just Arab, but all humans are facing. And I think that may be where we can find some way of having a good discussion. It's not one culture against another, it's a human problem. Ariana?
When I said what I was saying, my purpose wasn't to say that anything anyone's dealing with is invalid. However, groups such as like Al Qaeda or Hamas or ISIS, I don't really know any other ones, but those are the ones that those are the ones that come to mind for me. There are people who are involved, of course, but there are innocent people who are the ones who are dying, who are not involved, they're innocent, who are like they're being murdered. There is no reason for them to die. And this is where the issue is because there is a lot of generalization of like certain groups, like you said, like Jewish people, right? Like I've heard multiple things about multiple groups of people. And honestly, it seems like if you are not of a certain race or whatever, then you're grouped in, and that is that.
Well, I would add to that, and maybe we'll move on. I want to remind you of a remarkable figure in 20th century history. His name was Yitzhak Rabin. Do any of you know the name Yitzhak Rabin? In the 1990s, he was Israel's president. And, okay, sure, okay, coming. Yitzhak Rabin, like Mahatma Gandhi, like Abraham Lincoln, wanted to unite the people. He was assassinated, not by an Arab, but by a fanatic Jew who wanted to stop his own president from making peace. And he was killed at a peace rally in Tel Aviv of 100,000 Israelis who had gathered. So we have a deep, deep human problem in what I would call fanaticism. I don't know how we're going to solve it, but Ryan, here we go.
Whoever's in the chat's got to wait to speak because I've been waiting 20 minutes. But it's okay. All right. Yeah, I just want to say, like, I don't know, like concerning September 11th, I think that was mainly, I don't know, I sincerely think that that was orchestrated by the U.S. government to basically gain more control over their country because, like, ever since then, they've made this big fuss about, oh, we need more national security. It was just as their way of saying that we need more control over the people. So scapegoating some other race, which has been repeated through history, as like you just like alluded to, that's a common theme. So I would not put that past the U.S. government at all to be above doing something like that. And I actually heard like I've watched a video that was this guy who used to work in I think it was the White House. He was saying something like they were kind of like in the first couple days after 9/11, they were trying to figure out what was going on, and then after a little while, they were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to war with Iran," but like why? And it's just like, yeah, we don't know. We just decided we're going to war with Iran, so but it seems like
Okay, let me stop for a second, and I'm going to say something kind of tough to make you think, okay? But I would say it of myself. Ryan, I think you're displaying mushy thinking. It's not crunchy like a carrot. I want crunchy thinking. Mushy is, I saw a video and this guy was talking about. I want to know more about how you could come to a position where you think something. I worry that you are vulnerable to a lot of nonsense on the internet. That's a strong statement, okay? And I say that of myself, okay? Yes.
okay. Yeah, I'm kind of losing my train of thought a little bit, but I think I do think that there, and I don't think anybody is kind of above this, that we do generally have a sense of confirmation bias to like when we see something online that backs up what we've already thought, because that was not like basically what my opinion was based off of, but it was just like, that makes a lot of sense to kind of justify that national security issue. But I don't know, I think that like it seeing what is transpiring in the world today, with the government trying to even in America implement digital currency system and basically have control over your pocket, and trying to get rid of cash and all these kinds of things to basically have more intelligence spying on the people, it's very likely that that was the case, and that the whole story that they concocted was just something to scapegoat somebody else for their reason to um basically try and force the people into a mentality, or we're scared, we need to implement some changes, but it's not actually for their best interest, it's just appearing like it is, right? And also, I just wanted to say something quick about the CIA documents. It's funny how many people don't read those things, because like I've read things concerning a CIA documents about more spirituality based stuff that is actually like knowledge that people would say is like woo magic stuff, but it's documented by the CIA. The fact is nobody reads these things, so
Do you want to give her the mic? Okay.
Yeah.
You guys pass the mic around and we'll play this out, okay? I'm listening. I want you to speak, and I want the others too. And we will learn from each other.
During the summer, I dated this guy who was very into the CIA documents, and he told me some pretty interesting things about like telekinesis and like different sort of things, that the government has the information to do all these things, but like doesn't want the people to know, right? However, in my point of view, I think, from my personal standpoint, when Justin Trudeau gets on TV and says some crazy shit, and he's like saying some weird, crazy stuff, and people are like, oh, he's so crazy, whatever, it is taking up news time from other issues in the world. And so we're more focused on, like, let's say, like, I don't know what's the most recent weird thing he said, but he says a lot of things that make people worried about what he's doing rather than globalized like issues throughout the world, if that makes sense. So 9/11 could have easily been something that was orchestrated to mute anything else that was happening in the world, so that Americans were more focused, oh my gosh, like all these Americans died, blah blah blah. I didn't even know until like this year that there's millions of people who passed away in the Middle East because of 9/11. I didn't know about that because it's so like every year it's so like patriotic sort of thing, and like I don't know. I just think that there's not enough transparency when it comes to like things the government knows and the things that they tell us.
Yeah, Lydia wants to speak, and Trevor? Yeah, okay.
On the topic of trustworthy sources, I've always been pretty careful about like what places I go to, and this is more a question for you than necessarily a discussion point. But out of as your opinion as a former journalist and like your experience with other journalist organizations, and like who do you think what is a form of policy that you would think would make a trustworthy like journalist group?
Well, I'm going to speak about history for a moment. Are any of you familiar with something called Watergate? Okay. Okay, let me just to answer you, Lydia, okay? Watergate is a hotel in Washington, D.C. And there was a time when there was an American president named Richard Nixon. And there were two journalists who worked at the Washington Post, Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. And to kind of cut a long story short, to give you the critical stuff about the journalists, it was through the work of Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward that's been celebrated in a movie called All the President's Men that you can see on Netflix, but you can also read their books, All the President's Men and Final Days. They worked really, really hard to uncover what turned out to be Richard Nixon's attempt to bug the room in the Washington Hotel. He was a Republican president, and he had men break into that room to take files of the Democratic opponent. They were using that room. So there were files in there. There were also, I believe there was some electronic equipment that was to be put in there so that the president could defeat his enemy, the Democrats. The Washington Post began to publish this before any other journalists. And it turned out they had this amazing source, and his name was Deep Throat. You ever heard this term, deep throat? I know. I see you laughing, and I'm not going to ask you, what are you thinking of right now? But I'm not going to go there with you because that's unfortunately part of our culture today. Deep Throat happened to be a real person who was, it turned out, meeting with Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein in an underground garage in Washington, providing them with documents showing that actually the president was meeting privately with a team of what were called plumbers. They were the plumbers. They were the men instructed to go into the hotel, the Watergate Hotel, and steal these files so that Richard Nixon could know what his Democratic enemy was doing and win re-election. Well, eventually, this became so widely reported, and Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein refused to say who Deep Throat was. Just the way I sat in a courtroom in Toronto, you can Google this, and I refused to give my notebooks over to a judge and a lawyer who subpoenaed me because they wanted to use my notebooks in a court case, and I refused to do that. Google it, you'll see. It was written about the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, everywhere. A journalist works really, really, really hard, the good journalists, to find out something that people don't know, particularly about some kind of corruption, about some kind of abuse of power. And when they're told that information, they will not divulge their source. Absolutely not, because that is confidential. It is also a privilege, a journalistic privilege, to be told that information and then release it to the public for the public good. That's what Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward did, is they reported on what Deep Throat was telling them, and eventually Richard Nixon had to resign during his time as president. Now, This is a remarkable moment in American history. But it was only because of Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward and the work they did as journalists that made this story public. I know, and I'm now speaking as a journalist with a little bit of passion, that there's a lot of cynicism today about the quality of information you get from journalists. But I also know that journalism as a craft is like teaching. It is a public good. In the early French Revolution, there was a thing called the Fifth Estate. They were the journalists, the institution of power that is supposed to hold the other powers in check, the politicians, the judiciary. That's what we do, good journalists really do, is they will work hard to tell us something we need to know that is often an abuse of power. So to answer your question, I would say that Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, Lydia, and the work they did with Watergate in bringing down an American president who had committed a crime and tried to cover it up are my heroes. Maite?
Hi, I would like to wrap it up, the whole different subjects we have been talking about. Yes, so, all right. First, if we go to the first topic we were talking about the situation in Palestine, and you said Israel has every right to be there and be acknowledged as a state.
Yes.
Okay, I have several comments about that. I'm not saying they have to be spelled or anything like that, but historically, the history of Jews, they say this land was promised to them for God. Okay. Well, but yes, well, I also can tell you the same about anything. When they leave Egypt, 300 years, I think they were in Egypt, 300 or 500? No, only the Jews in Egypt. How long they were like captives there? Yes, if you see Egypt, ancient Egypt history is way too big, and the Jews were only there like 300, 400 years. And they went in their way to go to the promised land. And they took 40 years to get there, okay? But if you go to Google Maps, it only takes you 7 hours in a car drive or 6 days walking. Why they spend 40 years in the desert? Because they said, oh, God promised us these lands. Oh, all right, but those lands had already people and cities. Yes, but God promised us that land. Okay, so you just need to go and take them? That's right. Okay, because that is my basic logic. Okay, but God, this place is already taken. Yes, you just need to kill everybody and take that land. Okay, point number one. They spent there, the history, whatever. They had invasions. They grew up a civilization. They grew up kings. They did everything. They had the romance, and then they left at some point. Some of them, sorry, yes, they spend an amount of time there. They build their cities, they did their culture, their civilization, and at some point, many of them left, and that's called the diaspora. The diaspora, okay, and they went to the rest of the world. They spread out, okay. We come to the 20th century, and then the Holocaust happened, and they are looking for a place because in Eastern Europe they weren't accepted. Okay? And they said, the British said, oh, remember that biblical passage or that religion story that told you that this land was for you? But guess what? Let's go and get it back. Okay? And they say that was promised, but you left. You left, and this is mine. And it's not like there weren't Jews living over there. There were also Arabs. Oh, that's it. Yes, the point is that there were people living there when they arrived, and they are taking over. Okay, and what you say about the CIA, I call me an idiot, but I think United States has many things to do behind stage because you are asking for sources, and I have the CIA director on a video in here in YouTube confessing all the coup d'etat that they had performed all over the years in many parts of the world. So if they are behind this, it doesn't shock me. Okay? Half of the I can do it, okay? But half of the analysis is in Spanish.
Just try this, and then we have to, well, this is something I've been wanting to do with all of you. Enter your IP address, try this, and follow, go into your Google bar, IP address, and then you will get, first, go into your Google search bar and enter that IP address. 10. Now, while Maite is doing that, I would like to, as always, yeah, okay. Just a second, I'm going to put this back on. First, I want to thank you. While Maite is going to put her source up for us, I want to thank all of you for the privilege it is to walk into a classroom week after week and have meaningful discussions with students who really want to have those meaningful discussions. And I really, really appreciate that. And I wish there were more time. Right now, I'm looking at the clock, and I have to be a professor now and say to you that essentially we have, right now, we started at our usual 12:10 time, and we have about 10 minutes left. So I need to do some wrapping up with you and explain how I'm going to get you the content, the critical. But in many ways, the content that we've covered right now and what Ariana said and her sincerity and her desire to find some way to stop the suffering on both sides, because it is just too much to take, is very important. Okay?
Theoretically, everyone has a right to land. The issue with it, theoretically,
Okay, so we're gonna get a source up there.
just
Yeah,
real quick.
go ahead. Yeah.
Theoretically, everyone has a right to land. Everyone who is religious will know this. We are all related, right? Theoretically, we do. However, when you are abusive and you are stealing it and you are, you know what I mean? Like, if it's done in an abusive way, you do not have the right to that land. That is what I just wanted to say.
Well, the question of who has the right to anybody's land, unfortunately, always goes back into history. And then we have to choose. Then we have to choose where history ends. Because today, I was going to talk a lot about conquest in the talk. But we kind of have. Yes, well, yes, in some ways, but it's an opportunity for us to understand that for all that we think we know from the study of history, from all that we think we know and believe, that we are smarter today, we are more compassionate, we don't want to go to war because our weapons are so great, that we're more tolerant and more democratic. For all those things we think we have, maybe we haven't learned enough. And I always love that line. For all that we know, what have we learned? Because here we are having a discussion about a war in the Holy Land, and this is no different in some ways than the wars that have taken place in this part of the world for many centuries and millennia. It is peoples conquering and taking other people's land and claiming that land for their own and believing as human beings that their religion, their ideology, their worldview gives them the right to do that. I want to remind you of one thing, if I can, before we stop today. If I can somehow find a way to wrap all of this up into something that speaks to the content, I want to bring back the map of the world and remind you about some. Oh, that's my tase. Just a second. It's so counter. Oh, just a second. I'll get it. There it is. Okay. Please take a look at the map again, all of you. And I want to remind you of something in which religion and worldview, and in a way, confirmation bias, continues to haunt us. That's a very good term, Ryan. In fact, probably if we could write one thing up on the board today to remember, it might be confirmation bias. Maybe you could write that in big letters and then put, by Ryan, because that was your thought. Let me just finish my thought. Take a look at that map again. In 1492, Cristoforo Colon, he was Italian, not Spanish. Many of the great explorers came from Italy. He was an entrepreneur, and he found investors to help with his mission across the Atlantic Ocean. And those supporters, after 7 years of trying to find money to support his mission, to find a sea route to India so he could make a lot of money, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain, who were extremely Catholic. Thanks. Put your name, and make sure you got take away the O for conformation and put an I, okay? Just to make, no, that's good. The other O. Conform. Yeah, it's confirmation. You got it. But you're not right. It is conforming, but confirmation bias. When they gave Christopher Columbus the money for his 3 ships to go across the ocean and see if he could open up the sea route that Marco Polo had opened up about 200 years earlier as a land route, Marco Polo's travels, the 1200s, when he came back from China, after having gone all the way from Venice by land and lived in China for 27 years, no one had ever done that. A European is hired by the Mongolian emperor, Kublai Khan. When he came back to Italy, and it said he wrote his travels about this encounter with this other culture, the Great Orient, Cathay. Ever wonder why it's called Cathay Pacific? The airline in Asia, because that's what China was called, Cathay. 200 years later, Cristoforo Colon gets a copy of that because a printing press has just been built by Johannes Gutenberg in Germany about 30 years before, and books are starting to be published. And he gets a copy of that, and he starts making notes in it. I can show you the proof. I lived in southern Spain. I lived in Barcelona for 2 years, and I also lived in Cordoba for about a year. And there is a library in Sevilla, which is very near Cordoba. And there you can see copy of Marco Polo's travels that Christopher Columbus made notes in. He wanted to do what Marco Polo did by sea, to get to the Orient faster, to bring back all of their goods and make more money. What a difference those two stories are. When Marco Polo went, he opened himself up to the Chinese culture, and Kublai Khan, a brutal Mongolian emperor. The Mongolians had the greatest land empire in all of human history, but they were clever. They built the Silk Road system that connected China and India and the Europeans and created this great trade network. Kublai Khan hired him, and they became kind of allies. A European and a person from the Far East. The opposite happened with Cristoforo Colon when he was given his money from King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. He also had the full support of the Pope, who said to many who were beginning to explore and think about ways across the Atlantic, if you encounter peoples who are not Christian, well, you should make them Christian. And if they don't want to become Christian, they're savages. Kill them. Destroy them. In the name of our great faith. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to read you real evidence of confirmation bias. In other words, Christopher Columbus, unlike Marco Polo, when he encountered new peoples, he decided that he would act towards them based on what he'd been told. And what he'd been told by the Pope, just a second, what he'd been told by the Pope was, these people, if they are not Christian, they are not human. Now, if you do not believe me, I must end the class today with this reading. I have to. And then I can fill in. There's so much I want to tell you about Greece and Rome and the Crusades and the great societies of the Americas, the Aztecs, Maya, the Olmecs, an incredible world that Columbus was coming into. I can't now because I'm running out of time. However, I need to read you this because it speaks so much to the haunting problem we have in our world in the way we look at people who are different. Now, Jared Diamond wrote a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies, and he's a professor at California, University of California, and he spent many years living with tribal communities, doing his research. He tried to understand in his book why in civilization, when humans start to form these societies around rivers that grow into cities and empires, and then they come into contact, why do we start to see hierarchy and inequality and injustice developing so much? Because it all seemed to happen with the origins of civilization, with cultures coming together more and more through conquest, through trade, through sharing of ideas. These cultures are coming together. And it almost seems like we can't handle it. Now, I must read you this because it turns out that in 1532, 40 years after Christopher Columbus landed in the Bahamas and began to bring more and more people from Europe to the Americas, before he used his powerful weapons of guns and germs and steel and many other ingredients of conquest to slaughter and destroy the indigenous peoples, the Taino Indians, for example, in the island around the Bahamas where he first encountered them, they eventually started to commit mass suicide instead of having to go to the sword or be burned because they refused to bring Columbus what he wanted, which was gold and silver. That's all they wanted. Marco Polo, when he went east, he wanted that too, but then he opened himself up to something, and so did the Chinese. But this was savage and cruel and was all about greed. Francisco Pizarro, who was like a Christopher Columbus, was another one of these explorers and adventurers, and he was illiterate, but he was brave and he wanted to make a lot of money, so he led a mission. Instead of going to the Bahamas, 40 years later, he went all the way around the southern part of South America, and he came up the Pacific coast, and he landed at Peru. And he went inland because he heard about the Inca people, the Incas. And there was a meeting between Francisco Pizarro, 200 of these conquistadors in Cajamarca in 1532, and about 70,000 Inca peoples led by their emperor, Atahualpa, who came together for a fateful meeting in a public square in Cajamarca. Imagine this. The European explorers on their horses and with their weapons have arranged to meet the great Inca leader Atahualpa and his people for a meeting to welcome each other. Well, here's what happened. Francisco Pizarro had many men with him, about 200, and they wrote letters, and they kept journals, and they wrote about what happened, and this becomes what we call, as scholars, primary source material, eyewitnesses to history, the real stuff. Here's what the men said. And what Jared Diamond did is he took from several of these accounts of letters and he created one account. So he sort of took a bit from one and another, so he gives an account of what Pizarro's men witnessed in 1532 when they were confronted with 70 to 80,000 of these Incas coming towards them, armed, but not with guns or with horses. They had stone and they had wood and they had other weapons, but they didn't have the metals that the Europeans did, and they did not have the horses. In the great irony of history, horses originated in the Americas, but then humans drove them out and killed all the other animals that were here, and the horses then went north across the Bering Strait, and then they went east and they became the weapon, the great weapon and form of transportation for the Asians and Europeans, even though it started in the Americas. First came a squadron of Indians. They call them Indians because they thought they were going to be in India. That was the whole idea. And Columbus still to his death believed that he had arrived in India. First came a squadron of Indians dressed in clothes of different colors like a chessboard. This is Pizarro's men describing. They advanced, removing the straws from the ground and sweeping the road. Next came 3 squadrons in different dresses, dancing and singing. Then came a number of men with armor, large metal plates, and crowns of gold and silver. They loved that gold and silver. They were illiterate, most of them, but they knew, get that gold and silver from the Americas. We'll take it back and we can use it for our churches. Absolutely. So great was the amount of furniture of gold and silver which they bore that it was a marvel to observe how the sun glinted upon it. What a lovely detail, huh? The sun glinting on the gold and silver. You could see them salivating almost at this. Among them came the figure of Atahualpa in a very fine litter. That's a platform. I had the slide ready for you today, but it's the cover of this book. It's the image from the cover of this book. A litter is a platform. Then came Atahualpa in a very fine litter with the ends of its timbers covered in silver. 80 lords carried him on their shoulders, all wearing a very rich blue livery or a uniform. Atahualpa himself was very richly dressed, with his crown on his head and a collar of large emeralds around his neck. He sat on a small stool with a rich saddle cushion resting on his litter. The litter was lined with parrot feathers of many colors and decorated with plates of gold and silver. Behind Atahualpa came 2 other litters and 2 hammocks, in which were some high chiefs, then several squadrons of Indians with crowns of gold and silver. These Indian squadrons began to enter the plaza to the accompaniment of great songs, and thus entering, they occupied every part of the plaza. In the meantime, all of us Spaniards were waiting, ready, hidden in the courtyard, full of fear. Here comes the detail that always makes me know this is true. Many of us urinated without noticing it out of sheer terror. Now, what warrior, what fighter is ever going to admit that he pissed his pants because he was so scared? That's the human reaction. They're terrified. All these people coming towards them. These people they've never met. Thousands, Lydia, thousands, with Atahualpa coming in front of them, and there's only 200 of them. Wait at this. You have the 21st century perspective, which is wonderful.
It's not like a happy dance sort of thing. If it's like a rival sort of thing, like they will kill you, and that's why they're like, oh shit, like we're gonna die.
Okay, I gotta finish. Please. I wish the microphone. Listen, guys, for who are watching the recording, if only you could hear these 2 wonderful students debating a critical historical event from 2 sides. This is gold for me as an educator. But they can't hear it. I have to stop you and finish this because I need to finish this. And we will return after reading week and continue. But thank you. Lydia is saying, for all of you watching the recording, why weren't they amazed and dancing and fascinated by these people? And of course, Ariana is giving another perspective, which is, yeah, I get why they're scared shitless. They're terrified of what's coming. Lydia is making the assumption that maybe they're friendly. Maybe they were. Wait till you hear what happens. On reaching the center of the plaza, Atahualpa remained in his litter on high while his troops continued to file in behind him. Now here comes the critical moment. I'm so glad none of you know this, because I love reading this. Governor Pizarro now sent Friar Vicente de Valverde to go speak to Atahualpa and to require Atahualpa, in the name of God and of the King of Spain, that Atahualpa subject himself to the law of our Lord Jesus Christ and to the service of His Majesty, the King of Spain. Advancing with a cross in one hand and the Bible in the other hand, and going among the Indian troops up to the place where Atahualpa was, the friar thus addressed him, I am a priest of God, and I teach Christians the things of God. And in like manner, I come to teach you. What I teach is that which God says to us in this book. Therefore, on the part of God and of the Christians, I beseech you to be their friend, for such is God's will. And it will be for your good. Now you tell me, what Jew, what Christian, what Muslim, what Buddhist, what Zoroastrian has never said that? I come to teach you. I know more than you do. I'm not going to say that the Sikh does that, because what I've learned of the Sikh faith is really quite remarkable in terms of this community. However, and I'm not going to ask you to answer this, I wonder if you actually believe that somehow you're just a little better than we are. Just a little. Atawopa asked for the book, the Bible, that he might look at it, and the friar gave it to him closed. Atawopa did not know how to open the book. They didn't have writing. That would have been nice if Lydia had been there, because she would have figured that out. And the friar was extending his arm to do so. History turns on what's about to happen right now. When Atawopa, in great anger, gave him a blow on the arm, not wishing that it should be opened, then he opened it himself. And without any astonishment at the letters and paper, he threw it away from him 5 or 6 paces, his face a deep crimson. The emperor was blushing. Now what's going to happen? The friar returned to Pesaro shouting, come out, Christians. Come at these enemy dogs who reject the things of God. That tyrant has thrown away my book of holy law to the ground. Did you not see what happened? Why remain polite and servile toward this overproud dog when the plains are full of Indians? March out against him, for I absolve you. The governor then gave the signal, and we began to fire the guns. Remember, the thousands didn't have guns. They'd never seen a gun. They'd never even seen a horse. A horse to them was like a tank. And then they knew that. The Pesaro knew that. So they had the horses make a lot of noise, so that it scared them. At the same time, the trumpets were sounded, and the armored Spanish troops, both cavalry and infantry, sallied forth out of their hiding places straight into the mass of unarmed Indians crowding the square, giving the Spanish battle cry, Santiago! We had placed rattles on the horses to terrify the Indians. The booming of the guns, the blowing of the trumpets, and the rattles on the horses threw the Indians into panicked confusion. We fell upon them and began to cut them to pieces. The Indians were so filled with fear that they climbed on top of one another, formed mounds, and suffocated each other. The cavalry rode them down, killing and wounding and following in pursuit. The infantry made so good an assault on those that remained that in a short order, most of them were put to the sword. This is close-up, face-to-face combat. This is not today's combat where it's a video game. Let's just fire a missile, boom, kill a whole bunch of people. You are right up close, and you are hacking and hacking and hacking and hacking every 2 seconds. That's how the Romans did it, the Greeks, and everybody else up until we got machines. War was like that. But you had the metal sword. And if you could just hack, 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 all the way, like you're cutting through a cornfield. But it's people you're killing. The question I'd like you to think about, we must end now, is, and I'm going to let you think about this till reading week. We have to stop and I want you to really think about this. We'll pick this up next time. It's a really hard question. If the Incas were had so many more men, why didn't they fight back? They had the numbers. Oh, they knew how to fight. The Incas had fought many battles in their own part of the world. They came to power by defeating many others. They were tough men. They were not unprepared for war. I'm going to let that sit with you. Why would they never fight back? Well, guys, it's 2:00. A remarkable recording we're going to have, and please think about this. Have a great reading week. I will post the rest for you online, and enjoy the time off. Thank you. We'll make sure you keep the link. We'll look at it. And for those of you online, I will save the live chat, and don't worry, we will review this when we return. There's so much I need to tell you still. But now you know something about a critical moment. Okay, thank you. Must save this chat before I forget it. Otherwise, great, I've got it. Okay, I have to stop the stream. No, he was alone. They left. He was by himself. Yes. Sure. Okay. Yeah, they were merchants. They were entrepreneurs. They were merchants. Yeah. Oh, let me stop the stream. Hold on. Yeah. Hold on. Just a second. Okay. Too many things. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. This book you can find. I highly recommend this book. Online? Oh yeah, you can get it for $15. Oh yeah, it's a great book. Absolutely great book. Yeah, it's a classic. Okay. Let me just stop this for a moment. Where is our? I don't know what's happening here. Again, I'm losing the. Where does this go? What keeps happening to this? The live stream, I'll just have to end it this way then. Okay, let's stop it here. End stream. Yep. Then